good morning, good afternoon, depending on where exactly you are, and welcome to our new series of webinars, The Future of Research. And in this one, I'm going to be talking to you, along with a number of my colleagues, about more haste, less speed, understanding what is the true meaning of agile within the context of market research. Now, I think it's fair to say that agile is a very widely understood, potentially a slightly abused term in terms of market research, with many meanings. And we had a virtual dinner with a number of marketeers and marketing research professionals. And one of the questions we asked the panel was, well, what do you understand by the term agile? What do you think it means to you? And we had a number of different definitions. Some freely admitted that it often gets used as I want something faster and cheaper. Others were talking about something that is maybe collaborative, maybe something also that is iterative, or working in a flexible way, testing and learning and meaning as we go, being adaptive. And I think the truth is, and hopefully as we'll show today, that the answer is that agile can mean all of these things. There is undoubtedly quite a specific technical definition of what agile means. But in terms of research, I think we can agree that there are lots of different interpretations. And what I'm going to do today, along with my colleagues who you'll see here, is give you an understanding and a flavor about just how these different interpretations can be seen and how each has merit and can be bringing people direct insight, strong decision making as a result. So I'm joined by Eleanor, Duncan, Ali and Frank, and what they're going to be doing in turn is talking through 3 case studies which each give different perspectives about what agile can mean for market research, and showing you via case studies exactly what we did and one way that we delivered more strongly for our clients. So what I'm going to do now is hand over to Eleanor. I'm going to let all of these people introduce themselves as they go. And Eleanor is going to be talking to us one particular case study around how she brought agility and how Ipsos brought agility to creative development. So Eleanor, I'm going to try and hand over to you, and hopefully that's going to work.
Okay, so I'm Eleanor Thornton-Firkin and I head up Creative Excellence in Ipsos UK. Oh, and I am now hopefully actually appearing on your screen. And so actually I'm going to talk to you about how Budweiser used this very iconic campaign in order to show how actually agility can be speed. So they came to us with a question about whether they could take this iconic ad and actually rework it for the COVID-19 context. And so they came to us with this very interesting question. Hi, what's the fastest way we can get consumer feedback on an ad? We of course said, well, we've got this great new solution, Creative Spark, and in the US it comes with a COVID-19 benchmark. They of course were super interested, but of course, as with all research briefs, throws a little bit of a curveball. It's in 2 studies and we want to start tomorrow. And we replied with some wonderful rockets taking off because actually, yes, we could go immediately. And so a 5-day journey began with the team. Using, as I say, our new pre-testing methodology, Creative Spark, which is designed to go super fast within 24 hours. And so on day 1, we received the ad from the team for both the US and the UK. We put it into field, we launched it that evening, and then on day 2, fieldwork end, we got the first results, and on day 3, we're in a position to give the team our insights and recommendations. Now, there were at that point some clear opportunities to optimize the work. It did brilliantly in terms of getting branded attention, making sure that the brand was attached to it, as you might expect from such a great iconic ad. But there were just some things that it needed to do in terms of dialing up what they were trying to achieve. They needed to make sure that Bud and how it helped connect friends together were really coming through, and also to tweak some of the end frames on the ad to really ladder up to the final message that they wanted to deliver, and therefore to bring the brand into a better relationship with the consumers. So we delivered that insight at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. By 6 o'clock, the ad agency had done an amazing job and actually revised the creative, revised the headlines, and we were back into field by 7 o'clock that evening. So this was pretty fast, right? Back through that cycle again. Day 4, field work ended, and on day 3, we were able, on day 5, sorry, we were able to deliver the insights that they needed in order to go forward and actually launch to air. And that is because this new reworking with the strengthened proposition that it had actually increased the relationship that they had by 22 points. And we had much better connection in terms of how Bud was helping people with friendship, with connecting them in the spontaneous reactions, leaving people in the facial coding with a huge amount of positivity and warmth, both towards the brand and towards how they could interact with the brand and their friends during the COVID crisis. Because of the speed with which we delivered it, the clients were absolutely delighted. It meant that they could bring this iconic ad back and rewrite ABI history. But of course, importantly, the global team needed to get the local teams on board, and having true data actually allowed them to get that buy-in from the UK and US markets and then launch the ad into market. And they did so with much acclaim, both from the ad industry more generally, but also from consumers who were so pleased that they're brought back. Something nostalgic, something that they made them feel warm and comfortable. And actually, I think in today's environment, it's absolutely worth us watching this ad and thinking about its messages and how we might want to enact these things with our friends in the coming months.
Able to pick up good yardage on the play. You know, the best part of this defense is their defensive line and their interior.
Hello?
linebacker.
Hey, who? What's up?
Nothing, B. In quarantine, having a bud. What's up with you?
Nothing. Quarantining, having a bud.
True. True.
What's up? What's up? Yo, who's that?
Yo, pick up the phone.
Hello?
What's up? What's up?
Yo, where's Dookie?
Yo, Duke. Yo. What's up? What's
So you okay, B?
I'm good, B. Just quarantining, having a bud. Thanks for checking in.
So a great ad brought back with now a really resonant message. And then with that, I'm going to hand over to my bud, Duncan.
Good afternoon, everybody. And just as my screen is loading, I'll introduce myself. I'm Duncan Ferguson, and I'm Director in Social Intelligence Analytics for Ipsos in the UK. What we've, as I move my screen on, what we've learned from Eleanor is a fantastic example of how we've saved a client many days, if not weeks, to invest heavily in what was a winning advertisement. They could act quickly and with complete confidence that they'd made the right decision. What I'm going to talk about today is potentially a sort of more thorny challenge, and that's around innovation. I spent many years in innovation research, and I'm absolutely fascinated by the process of innovation. For me, innovation really is fundamentally about finding new and better ways of meeting existing consumer and market needs. Essentially, it's the essence of entrepreneurialism. But we know, and here are some examples on the screen, that it's a desperately difficult undertaking for organizations to do consistently and over time. On the left, we've got a raspberry flavored Frappuccino. In the middle, it's a picture of some low-fat fries, which didn't taste particularly nice. And on the right-hand side, a green sauce timed with the launch of a Shrek film. Famously, we fired a dog called Laika into space many years before we could produce a suitcase with wheels on. So why do companies find innovation so difficult? And indeed, the academic literature substantiates this. Fully 90% or so of innovations now are thought to fail to meet the objectives that their organizations are setting them. And indeed, the failure rate is continuing to increase. Fundamentally, it's the innovator's dilemma. Companies look to invest behind often incremental innovations, sustaining innovations in the lexicon, with a view of having projectable revenues from those innovations. But that typically will hit diminishing returns, and companies in that mindset will be blindsided by innovative new entrants, fresh ways of meeting consumer needs. So what I'm going to talk through today is an example of how we use social data in order to do that. And we did this within 4 weeks, whereas a conventional process, which I'll talk through in a moment, could take often many months. So we really do think there's a better way. And the inspiration for ourselves are companies like Lego, Nike, Bang, and Olufsen, who've consistently been able to reinvent themselves. And so what we started, so well, what's the story behind these companies? Why are they doing it? What's happening there? And so for inspiration, we took the story of Bill Bowerman, who was a track and field coach at the University of Oregon. He was obsessed with his students' performance, and he microscopically looked at every element of their behavior and all aspects of their lives to drive that performance further. And one of his observations was simply the shoes weren't good enough. They weren't giving his students sufficient stability to reach the potential that they could. And so he, in breaking his wife's waffle line in the process, he devised this new invention called a waffle sneaker that we see here, that provided better stability in an easy to use, easy to wear shoe. For us, Bill Bowerman is very much, we would define him as a lead user. He's somebody who's engaged in the activity, who's expert and committed. He can identify and relentlessly consider the needs, the opportunities, and then come up with a solution. So ultimately what he did was he found a valuable solution for a real consumer problem, and then he could deliver that in an attractive, easy to use format. And this has really been, if you put those two things together, that's really been the driving force, the DNA of so many of recent innovations. Of course, when we think of the big digital innovations that we're seeing, where we're seeing companies in established categories upending established providers in those categories, fundamentally, they're solving the consumer question, the consumer challenge in a new and better way. So this really inspired us and thought, well, okay, can we as Ipsos help our clients with lead user innovation? The conventional approach for lead user innovation, which is well established in both academia and in practice among many organizations, is to go through iteratively, often over many months, identifying somebody who could be a lead user, observing what they're doing, perhaps interviewing them, snowballing to what could be other lead users, and so on. It did bear successes, but it was expensive, it was frustrating, and nonetheless, because often at the end of the process, you wouldn't know whether you'd actually achieved anything. It wasn't always certain whether you could actually identify at the end of an expensive, time-consuming process, something that would be worth developing for market. So we thought, well, with the rise of the internet, not only is it challenging categories, it's presenting where there's an almighty amount of data. And with the growing analytics and techniques at our fingertips now, we wanted to pilot, which was what we did with the MIT, a new way of spotting innovations through, in this case, through social data. The example that we took to pilot the activity was kite surfing. We picked kite surfing, if nothing else, because it's actually an established academic proving ground for lead user innovation, because it has a number of characteristics that just lend itself well to the activity. So it's relatively recent, it's global, there are 2 million people engaged. And the key thing is that the sport has evolved pretty quickly and with quite a lot of innovations driven by lead users. Much of the hardware, the equipment that kite surfers use has often been adapted for windsurfing, water skiing, paragliding, for example. Lead users are also at the forefront of developing new techniques, new ways to compete, and new skills within kite surfing. So we thought, well, okay, just to pilot this idea, if we could get it to work with kite surfing, then we'd be pretty confident that we've got something that we could then test and develop for clients with probably more prosaic business challenges and categories that they deal with. So in essence, in 4 weeks, this is what we did. First of all, we scoured the world for scoured the world's conversations relating to kite surfing over the past 10 years. We assembled, give or take, 250,000 comments about kite surfing. Now, there ain't anything about kite surfing. Had a great kite surfing today, or something which could be more useful to us. Tried this new piece of equipment, and it really worked. So what we had to then do is apply heavy text analytics iteratively to reduce that down. And we reduced down to about 450 potential innovations. And what I mean by potential innovations, this is when the text is telling us that there's something new going on here. There's maybe a new piece of equipment, for example. And so we can say, well, okay, that makes the short list, and also that it's meeting a need. So then with that 450, we then did a manual review to read them and say, well, okay, which of these are actually user generated as opposed to being generated by a company, for example? And then which of these are actually new as opposed to people talking about them in a new way? It may be new in a market where it's being talked about, but it may be established elsewhere. So that reduced it down still further to about 25 or 26, which we as experts identified to be truly fundamental innovations that were meeting consumer needs. The final thing is we took best advantage of the longitudinal nature of social data to trend them over time and say, well, okay, are these on the up or on the down? And through that, we could then qualify 6 or so innovations which were genuine, driven by users, meeting fundamental consumer needs, and were at least, if not on the flat, certainly on the upswing in terms of trending. To underline, we did this in 4 weeks from a standing start. And here are some examples. Of the 6, here are 4 of them. On the left-hand side are what you might call more sustaining innovations in the lexicon, more incremental innovations. Still pretty fundamental for the users, but nonetheless, it's within the parameters of kite surfing. It's still got a kite, still got a piece of string attached, still got a board of some sort. There's a hardshell harness, and there's a kite foiling there, which takes the foiling idea from sailing, applies it to the board to give greater speed. On the right-hand side, a couple of more what we'd consider to be more disruptive innovations, because actually they're doing away with the whole kite altogether. So they're electrically powered, be it the electric foiling with a small torpedo motor, or the drone surfing where you're pulled along by the drone above the water. Of course, once we've got these established, then we can really dive into them. We can look at the imagery, the comments associated with them. So you've almost got a small reviews database within this lead user community that itself can be really handy to help inspire and also shape the development of any investment in the innovation. So to closing off this section, what we did is really in a very short amount of time, and what would typically be for a much lower budget, is we started from pretty much a blank piece of paper. And we've gone through the full lead user innovation process. We did it in parallel with the MIT so that we could check back to the types of work they've been doing, and that gave us confidence in the validity of our approach. And then since we undertook this pilot 18 months or so ago, we've gone on to deploy this in categories more characteristic of many of our clients, in beauty care, for example, respiratory health, and so on. So overall, it's been a great success. It is agile, it's iterative, and it's a lot quicker than any existing tool, and with greater certainty of success. So with that definition in mind, I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Ali Azim, and he's going to talk through his final. He's going to talk through his case study too. So just one moment while I change the screen.
Thanks so much, Duncan. Whilst that loads up, let me just take this as an opportunity to ask if you have any questions. Drop them in the chat. So far, we haven't had too many pop over, so please start getting a few questions in. There is going to be a moment for some question and answer. As Duncan just mentioned, I'm Ali Azim. I'm an associate partner at Strategy 3, which is the advisory arm of Ipsos. And what I'm going to talk you guys through today is exactly around this topic of what it means to be agile. Now, the term agile itself, of course, comes from the startup world. So often when we talk about the word agile, we talk about it with a few different meanings. You've heard two already about it being essentially around speed or around consumer centricity, but I want to take us through a few principles that I think are really important from the world of startups, a place where I used to work in a former life. And because that's where the concept of agile was really born from, and in fairness, particularly in the development world. But of course, we're not going to use exactly those same principles because we're not in the world of development, but we can take some of those principles with us. So in essence, what we're asking is, well, what does it mean to be agile and collaborative and to work in that way? To answer this question, I see 5 different areas that we could talk about. The first and possibly the most important is around working iteratively rather than just incrementally. And this is in many ways the crux of what I consider it to mean agile. And I want to bring this to life with an illustration, quite literally. I'm going to use the Mona Lisa here. Here you'll see an example of the Mona Lisa being brought to life in an incremental way. So from a small part of the portrait being produced to the full portrait. The difference when you move from incremental to iterative, here you can see actually it's built up in different stages. The earlier stages are lower fidelity and in fact therefore allow for slight changes to be made. So in this example, you can see the Mona Lisa in the first picture has her hand to her face. That then moves to it being down. In the third, you can see one color scheme in low fidelity, and then a different one in the fourth. And then finally, you have the masterpiece we all know and love. What we like to do when we think about how we bring the agile methodology to life is bring both of those components together, both iterative and incremental. And this is really the central point around being agile. And to do that, we do that in short sprints. And that neatly brings us in to the second point, which is about working in these short sprints. So what is a sprint? Well, as I mentioned before, this comes from the startup world. So we typically have a wish list of different areas that a client might want to develop. In the development world, in the tech development world, that would typically be features or things that need to be programmed. And then from that, those are prioritized and refined into what becomes the minimal viable product. And essentially that's coded as fast as possible. And then essentially the process starts again. What are the most important things to build? Now, what's different, I think, when we think about the principles we employ from a more research perspective is we do that, but also to bring in the flexibility as well as incorporating in feedback. So here what we really mean is not only are we working in short sprints, but we're also trying to gain an understanding of how to change the process slightly, and making sure that we're getting that feedback in one instance, like Duncan said, with that consumer centricity, but also with stakeholders for regular check-ins, really bringing all of this together And these are 4 of the key principles of Agile. The 5th principle then, I will I will come onto it in a second, but in essence, if I was to bring this to life in terms of how we bring that in an innovation sprint, you can see that we can use those same principles in a different way. So here we've got to start with some expansive ideation based on consumer insight, going very, very broad and expansive. And then in the next stage, using some testing in order to bring us down, essentially reducing that wish list. We then go into a second sprint where we start building out these pre-concepts into something a bit more higher fidelity, a bit like what we saw with the Mona Lisa earlier. So now we have fewer ideas, but we're making them a bit more solidified. And then we're getting, again, that consumer centricity, that consumer feedback, maybe through the use of communities in order to further refine those pre-concepts. And then finally, quantitative testing on the concepts that make it through that stage. So in each of these sprints, we're getting to that higher fidelity and getting more and more refined, really bringing that to life. Finally, we have our 5th and final attribute that we would like to bring out from the world of Agile into the way that we do things, and that's about one team, one dream. This is the real critical part of how it works. The way I think about this is that this is about working as one team across Ipsos and also with our clients. And in this case, I want to hand it over to Frank to talk about how that worked with a project with GSK.
Thank you very much, Ali. Yes, this is Frank Bacquet, working at GSK in the Insights and Analytics function, leading the pain relief category for the globe. So let me start by, repeating something that, Ali has said, that, Agile is really not limited to, startup, the tech world, or software development. This is something we do routinely at GSK, being sprint or Scrum sessions. And just in my team over the last 3 months, we've completed 4 of those projects with Ipsos and the Strategy 3 teams. So definitely something that is applicable to many, if not all industries. So yes, Ali has mentioned, the overall process. I'm gonna, share a few insights on one project we've done together, focusing very much on the output and some of the, learnings. What we wanted to do, and Ali, you can move to the next slide. On this one is really to innovate, and that was in the context of ideation, so building our pipeline of innovation, and we wanted to innovate on innovation, and we had a few challenges or opportunities ahead of us. Some were driven by us, for example, consumer centricity. We really wanted to dial up consumer centricity. Obviously, whenever we do ideation, we always involve the consumer, but we wanted to move this to the next level in line with our company mantra of consumer and customer obsession. We wanted really consumers to be fully embedded in the process, and yes, keep him or her at the heart of the process. The second challenge, opportunity, was a bit imposed on us, and that's obviously the pandemic we were going through and still are living through at the moment, that forced us to ideate fully in a virtual way, while typically that's something we would do in a traditional face-to-face way. And while trying to address those two challenges, we also wanted to keep something that makes typically a success of ideation process, which is a cross-functional expertise. So make sure we have the right representative from different functions, from different organizations, from global to regional to local. So yes, quite a few challenges, opportunity ahead of us, but we've overcome all of them, and throughout the process we've been through over a 4 weeks period. So we did 3 consecutive 1 week sprints, each of them, concluded by a, consumer, interaction. At the end of this process, we've progressed 9 new unique innovation that are already, integrated in our, brand strategy pipeline of innovation. And we have also formed the base of what will become our new, corporate ideation process that is now, adopted, further refined, improved, and rolled out to other categories. The approach, and I'll share a few statistics on the next slide, has been really, really appreciated internally by, our clients, by business partners, but also externally. We've been, for information, shortlisted for the forthcoming, MRS award ceremony. So good recognition, internally and externally. What have we done? So we brought together, 35 people virtually. We've spent 900 hours all together over 3-4 weeks period. We've generated 450 plus ideas, and through interactions with 6,000 plus consumers in 3 markets, we have been able to filter, cut down, select the best of the best. So 30 final product proposition that we have also obviously refined, improved throughout the process, and 24 of those 30 ideas scoring in the top quintile of Ipsos global database for new ideas, which is not a bad achievement. And also, yes, you see some of the statistics. So about 3/4 of our people thought virtual ideation was even better than what they had typically experienced of face-to-face workshop, and 4 out of 5 would recommend it to a colleague. So really a good experience for us from really the process itself as well as the output. And conscious of time, I will conclude with a few learnings for us. The first one is that obviously in a virtual world you don't ideate with 35 people. It's impossible. So what we did is break this team in smaller team of 4 or 5 people, each of them with a kind of team captain, and we would move from plenary session to breakout session where we would produce or select, filter in small group, then go back in plenary session. Second, I think it's important for both face-to-face and virtual sprints is make sure you start and you focus on real consumer problems. So being need gaps or trial barrier, no matter what you deal with, that's obviously the starting point. But beyond this, I think the learning is that preparation is key. And we had this rule with Ali that for 1 hour of workshop we would need 2 hours of preparation. So that's something you need to plan for. As I said, consumer centricity, dial it up. So we had 3 sprints, 3 consecutive sprints, and each of them was concluded by a form of consumer interaction, quali, quant, quanti, depending on the stage you need. Fourth is, yes, break it down, obviously, and we experience it at the moment. We most of us now live in a virtual world. You cannot spend 5, 6, 7 hours virtually in front of your screen. That's simply impossible. So we had to break down the interaction to much smaller chunks of 2 to 3 hours, which meant it took us more time at the end of the day, more weeks, but that was manageable for people. Obviously, the fifth one is, know the tools as you ideate or manage, participate in sprints, virtually. You're gonna deal with, new tools, new platforms. So in our case, we use the Miro platform that maybe some of you know I've used. That was new for most of our people. So we had to train them, we had to make sure they were comfortable, to use the platform. And the last thing is, yes, make sure you, which is important and so somehow is the most important one, is yeah, think digital in everything you do. So not only again the collaboration platform, but also the communication platform, the research tool you use because of the fast pace, the different consumer interaction we've used, where all overnight or over the weekend research. So we gave very little time to Ipsos to deliver what we needed, but they've definitely achieved, in fact exceeded expectation. And that may be the last success factor in all of this, is that you need to choose the right partner, one that has the expertise, that has the experience in running such agile sprint research, and the right people. And we found this partner with Ipsos and Strategy 3. That's it for me, and now I'm handing over back to Alex.
Wonderful. Thank you very much indeed. Let me just see if I can get myself on screen again. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Frank, for finishing us off. Thank you, Ali. Thank you, Duncan. And thank you, Eleanor, as well. Really interesting stuff. And yeah, I suppose gives me a chance to, I think, sum up a little bit about what we've learned and perhaps what brings these together. Because I think we've seen many different ways of thinking about agile, but what does bring these together is a strong commitment to collaboration and to a culture of wanting to make sure that we can bring the best ideas or the best decisions, the strongest decisions, to our clients in the most efficient way. And I suppose then we can think about committing to collaboration to be a really important thing in anything when we're talking about agile, whether it's the sprint approach, or whether it's just wanting to move exceptionally quickly in order to make some decision making about a new creative campaign. So collaboration, committing to that, would absolutely be the first point to think about in anything where we're looking at agile. And what Eleanor showed us is that one way that we can think about things and deliver results is by leveraging our quality models for robust answers at speed. So being able to have a good, strong, solid framework upon which we can launch a quick research, and we can get answers back which instantly give us deeper understanding into what we want to do. But we can also think about agile in a way that Duncan promoted, using advanced knowledge to get ahead of the game. And in where classically agile might be thinking about doing things very quickly, that might be talking about doing the process and getting to an answer quickly. The process and the answer getting to quickly is absolutely demonstrated by this lead user approach. But we shouldn't forget the incredible gains in speed, perhaps weeks, months of development time cut down by looking at a lead user approach. And finally, Ali and Frank talked us through what might be termed, I suppose, a little bit more of the classical thinking around agile as it relates to startups and how that's been brought into the research world, about learning iteratively, about learning flexibly, but always towards a clear end goal. And I think it's worthwhile just thinking about all four of those points about whatever we might be thinking about an agile way of doing things. Probably all of these can be thought and brought into mind, and which aspect do we want to take forward? Now, I can see that there have been a couple of questions come through. So what I'd like to do in the remaining time we have available, just a little bit more than 15 minutes, is answer some of those questions. So I'm going to invite my colleagues to come all on camera. I think what I'm going to do is also pause this question point and see whether we've got them online. Excellent. I can see everybody on board. I have a little bit of a list of questions. So I'm just going to pick up one by one. And I'd like to actually come back to Frank. So you finished off with 6, I suppose, strong points about what you need to be doing in order to work in the agile way you described. But we've had a really interesting question, I think, which is about what are some of the challenges you might have in embedding a culture of agile within your organization? So thinking about what do you need to push on to?
Honestly, we have not had, so much of a challenge. I think there is a lot of, appetite in our organization to embrace, new ways of working, new approaches. There is obviously, healthy, tension and pressure to do things, better and particularly faster. So I can't say we've had, so much of a challenge. Obviously, it requires people to work in a different way, to use different tools. So if anything, I think it's being familiar with some of the tools I've mentioned, but at the end of the day, those are well designed, relatively intuitive. So I can't say we've had so much of a challenge, and on the contrary, we had so much success in the first project we've run in this way, that it has created a bit of a virtuous cycle. Good news travel fast, and we had a great adoption throughout the categories and the regions.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Frank. Much appreciated. I've got a question here, which I think is going to be directed to Duncan. And it's a pretty good one, actually. What do I do if my category doesn't have any prominent lead users?
Yeah, that's a great question. And funnily enough, with the conventional lead user innovation approach, that would be a problem. Because in that case, the essence of the process is the lead user, and they're taking you to the promised land of a potential new innovation. What we're doing with social data is we're taking the idea that users, people, consumers are coming up with hacks, new ways of meeting their needs, but we're actually not so interested in the individuals at all. We're interested in what they're doing. We're interested in the challenges they're talking about, the ways their innovations, and the hacks they're coming up with are solving their problems. So technically it still is lead user innovation, that they're innovations generated by consumers, forward-thinking, engaged consumers, but we're not really going through the lead users to find those innovations. And in that way, we can work really across a wide range of categories, simply because we're looking at those hacks, those new ways of doing things, without having to rely on prominent individuals.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I realised I turned my mic off, so I couldn't answer. Wonderful stuff. Thank you very much, Duncan. Next question is for you, Eleanor. Speed often comes at the sacrifice of depth. What depth did you give with the approach that you used with Bud?
Yeah, I mean, it's true that speed obviously does curtail what you can do, but actually it doesn't need to be at the cost of depth. What it does need is standardization so that you can go really fast. But because we understand what's really important in terms of measuring advertising, we can make sure that all of those measures are in there as standard, and then be able to go really fast. So we know that attention is the most important thing in advertising now, and in fact forever. And so make sure that we've got something that truly measures that in a way that is natural to the way that people interact with advertising in their everyday lives is absolutely key, and that's baked in. Things like facial coding to really understand how people are reacting to the ads, that's in there, so you get the emotional response. And then we can do really clever things with opens these days to get sentiment analysis right immediately after people have typed in their responses. So we can get that too and really delve down into what's left, what are the residual feelings that people are left with. And of course, now, particularly on digital platforms, you can do really cool things like people can choose their own salient sets. What are they actually making their choices out of? And then you can observe the impact of the advertising on those choices. So that gives us huge amounts of depth, but because it's in a standardized format, you can also do it in 24 hours. For me, these are the things that are truly making research exciting at the moment, and we should be using technology to help us at every turn.
Excellent stuff. Very good. Ali, very conscious that I haven't given you an opportunity to speak for a moment, so I'll have a question for you. You suggested, or rather, I suppose it's a question for all of us, but I'm going to make you answer it, Ali, is we've suggested different definitions of the term agile. What should we assume a client means when they use this word? I think I know what my answer would be.
Yeah, well, it's definitely something I've noticed when speaking with clients in the past. So the number of times people have asked for an agile approach to something, and actually what they really meant it needed to be faster or something else. This is something that definitely does happen. I think it's really important to have that conversation and just clarify what that means, because if you're talking about an agile approach, which is to say that it's responsive to how the situation changes, that doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be faster or cheaper for that matter. And believe me, sometimes agile can also be a pseudonym for cheaper too. Yep. So I think it's definitely worth having that conversation with the client to really unpick what it means to be agile. And I think as a client as well, really think about what you're asking for when you ask for an agile approach, because sometimes you do need something that's quick and cheap, but actually sometimes you do also need something that is responsive to changing needs. So just think about these different definitions and then help unpack what you mean by it when speaking with whichever agency or group that you're speaking with.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ali. Let me just, sorry, I'm just scrolling through just to see whether there's anything else that has come through on those questions. It doesn't appear to be, in which case then I think I'm going to say a final thank you. Thank you to Eleanor, thank you to Duncan, thank you to Ali, and thank you to Frank. And that will just leave this for me to say thank you everybody who has dialed in. Really appreciate you joining. We will send you out a selection of the slides from this webinar recording, so you have it for posterity. Please note that we've got a second session, which we're running tomorrow, about creativity and curation. And then we will have a further week of Future of Research webinars happening in the very first week of November, from the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th of November, making it the final third of our messages to you. So really would like you to join those if you possibly can. Do go to the Ipsos website, look for Future of Research Series 2020, and you'll be able to find a place to sign up. And you'll be able to also to look back at some of the sessions you might have missed and maybe request either a session of your own or to gain the recording. Once again, thank you to the speakers. Thank you for everybody for dialing in, and have a good rest of the day. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.